now. Okay. So welcome everybody tonight to Theology Uncorked, and I'm going to give the floor to Brandon just for a minute, who is our co-host. He and I are married, if you don't know that already, but I'm really his co-host because he hosts Theology Uncorked and has done that for a long time. But I'm going to let him give an introduction to what Theology Uncorked is for those of you that haven't attended before.
Yeah, so Theology Uncorked is something we've been doing since Tears and I moved here about 5-6 years ago. Each month we do something different. So if you kind of like today's format, make sure you join us back in 2022 when we launch them again. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be face-to-face in 2022. So we'll have to see how everything kind of happens with the new variant. Yeah, so the thing that we really like here is that everyone is equal. The sort of symbolically that, you know, especially in COVID times, we're all in our own little squares and we all have an opinion. And so there are some times where we sort of have a topic and we just talk about it. Tonight, we actually are lucky that we have a guest speaker today. So Devin's going to take the floor, but then we're going to have some Q&A at the end. So some sort of groundskeeping rules. We will have a chat open. Tears and I will be watching the chat. I'm going to write down any questions that kind of come up to make sure that we don't forget them. But then when Devin is done, and depending on how it goes, he might have some questions and answers as we go. But we'll save questions to the appropriate time. We'll sort of wrap up at the end and then we'll get going. So looking ahead, this will be our last meeting. We will not meet in December and we may not meet in January, but hopefully 2022, we'll get this thing going back again. So really glad everyone is here. If this is your first night, welcome, and hope to see you again. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. All right. Hold on just a second. All right. So I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. You know that if you've been with Crosspoint at all or listened at all online, that we've talked a lot about affordable housing. We've talked a lot about things that we've been doing as Crosspoint for a really long time in regards to affordable housing in Wake County. We have a partnership with Habitat for Humanity and have had that for a while and have recently re-engaged with them and worked to build affordable housing in Wake County in the surrounding area. We work with Family Promise, who also is a part of working with churches to provide housing for families who are experiencing homelessness in our county. We also do a lot of work with unhoused populations, most recently with Operation Nayel, who is in Fuquay. And then we also, as you know, pay many, many bills every single month. And that is kind of how we got involved with finding out about One Wake. And Pam Markley and I, who's on, so she's here somewhere, look at bills that come in and requests that come in every single week about the lack of being able to pay mortgages, the lack of being able to pay rent, having to choose between paying a light bill or paying a mortgage or buying groceries that month and paying a bill. And we love to be able to pay those bills. And that's a really big part of what Crosspoint loves to do. However, the more that we talk about it and the more that we get involved, the more we realize that this is a problem that's systemic within our area and across the United States, but really extremely within Wake County. And many of you know and are involved in advocacy work and with nonprofits that do a lot of work to help with affordable housing in Wake County. However, we just really felt like we need to help be a part of getting to the root of this problem and working together with other people in our county to make change so that it's not just putting a Band-Aid on the problem with paying a few mortgages, paying a few rent bills, but figuring out how we can work together as a community to stop the problem to begin with. So Devin Ross is joining us tonight, and he has worked in this in advocacy for a really long time. One Wake has multiple not agendas, but multiple programs that they do, multiple issues that they work on. The one that we're talking about specifically tonight is affordable housing. And I do want to give you just a little bit about One Wake. It's a pretty new organization, and it is nonpartisan, it's multiracial, multi-issue, and it's a group of religious congregations, associations, and other nonprofits that are all across Wake County. And the goal of One Wake is for all these organizations to come together to help develop the skills within themselves that are needed to identify the problems that are common in our area, to identify the problems, and then to come together to work to create solutions to some of the systemic issues that are happening, to change our county and our society for the greater good. So that is just a really, really brief and overarching view of what One Wake does and why Crosspoint wants to be a part of working with that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Devin, and let you explain some more about what you do and how that works.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody for your time tonight. I'm glad for the opportunity to be here with you. I'm happy to be the speaker for tonight's seems like series end. Is that right? So I'm the big finish for what you've been doing all year together, and I hope I live up to that. I was thinking about tonight, and I thought I might do something in around this order. I'd be glad to just briefly introduce myself, One Wake, and the particular culture and discipline of organizing from which we come. Then I'd be happy to talk more in depth about our agenda around affordable housing and how we're approaching the issue in ways which may be different from, but almost certainly complementary to some of the initiatives that were just mentioned that you're already participating in Cary and across the county. And my goal is for this to be conversational. I'm happy to do a bit of a layout, hear your reactions and questions, and then just go where the energy seems to be. I've got some slides, I've got some videos. I'll probably forget to use them, but they're there as well, and we'll just see what we can make of this time together. So again, real pleasure to be here. I'm Devin Ross. I'm the lead organizer for One Wake. I'm the new kid on the block working with a relatively recently founded organization. I've been here in this role for a year. I fulfilled a similar role in Orange County, North Carolina, for the last 7 years before this one. And in one way or another, I've been trying to figure out how to be effective and how to make change in the world around me since high school. I blame my social studies teacher, Sharice Jackson, for a lot of the ways that my life has turned out, because she challenged me to take responsibility for the world around me and set me on a path that led me here today, all the way from St. Louis. It was because of Sharice and because of her mentorship that I found myself on the front lines of the foreclosure crisis in Chicago many years after high school, confronted by a crisis of epic proportion. We're aware of the story now, but back then in 2007, 2008, I watched hundreds of families come through the front door of the a local neighborhood nonprofit that I was working for, all of whom had been taken advantage of by predatory lenders back in the early aughts, in a neighborhood called Rogers Park. This was a beautiful neighborhood. I don't know if anybody here has been in Rogers Park before, but let me tell you, 40 different languages spoken in this one neighborhood alone. It's a port of call for immigrants, middle-class families from all over the world and all over Chicago. Pakistanis, Indians, Nigerians, just about everybody you could imagine. I fell in love with this neighborhood. But then I had to watch it get its heart ripped out by foreclosures back when people's loans adjusted upwards, when they couldn't pay for their skyrocketing interest rates, and when the market collapsed, they were unable to get out of their homes, and they came to me to try and get assistance one by one. I worked with about 150 families over the course of 2.5 years. I helped save 3 homes, and I watched everybody else lose everything slowly, month by month, every penny, all of their wealth and everything they'd worked their whole lives for. And very slowly, I became to realize that the process of getting assistance, of trying to negotiate with these big loan servicers that controlled their mortgages was just as predatory as the loans that got them in the homes in the first place. And I watched as families were suckered along to cash out their retirement accounts, their stocks, to make partial payments, to pay into recovery plans. I watched families get strung along until they were totally tapped out, and then the companies they were working with said, "Well, you know what? There's no program anyway. We've decided you can't afford this home in the first place." And I watched almost everybody I had gotten to know over the years, get an eviction notice, lose their home, and have to start over from nothing. Eventually, I got so angry and I felt so powerless that I decided I needed to do something differently. I mean, here I was in probably one of the biggest transfers of wealth, maybe biggest thefts of wealth, you could say, from the working class to the upper class in recent history. And there I was working one-on-one with families, helping them, show on budget worksheets how they could save money on toilet paper to justify some kind of workout plan with their loan servicer. I figured there had to be a better way to do it. I moved to North Carolina. I got settled here, and I was invited after a couple of years to attend a community meeting at Amity United Methodist Church in Chapel Hill to hear people talk about organizing. I heard an argument that I'll flesh out in a moment that just made total sense to me. That if you want to make change in this world, you need power. And if you don't have it, people with it are likely going to walk right over you, or at the very least, not take you seriously. Spoke so much to my experience in Chicago that I decided I'd stick around and learn more, and that's what eventually got me into this role. And I'm, here still. But yeah, before I get there, I just think that my experience in Chicago, filling out all those worksheets and all those request forms, I think that just mirrors so much of what I see today. With working in congregations across this county, where church after church, synagogue after synagogue, mosque after mosque, they're paying out more and more in emergency rent, utility assistance, food than ever before, and the need's only growing. And I think just like I was frustrated and angry in Chicago, more and more there's pastors, rabbis, imams, ministry leaders who are also growing frustrated, because no matter how much we give, no matter how many services we provide, the need's only growing. And I don't know if anyone here has ever felt this way, but sometimes it seems like you step back from it, we're just cleaning up somebody else's mess. It was because of these experiences, the experience of perhaps needing a new tool to address a deeper problem, that led a group of clergy here in Wake County to start to have meetings and to start to talk with each other all the way back in 2016 to share experiences in conversations that eventually led them to inviting myself and my colleagues to help them imagine building a new kind of organization here in Wake County, and one that was large enough, one that was powerful enough to take on the pressures, the growing pressures they saw impacting their families and communities across the county. Because there's never enough to meet the need out there in Wake, and I think what we started to encounter here are more symptoms of deeper systemic problems. Let me go slightly out of order here. But I think the basic argument here is that all of us are in congregations. All of us here have access to ministries that are providing assistance. We built One Wake to address this problem I mentioned. If one family doesn't have a home, we've got Habitat, and we help build them a home, and they help too. One family needs to be fed, or we've got a feeding program that can take care of that. But in Wake County right now, 50,000 households can't afford housing. So what do you do then? You need a different kind of tool, and we built One Wake so that we could bring together, at this point, 46 different churches, synagogues, mosques, nonprofits all across the county. That's a whole lot of people. We represent roughly 50,000 households across Wake County in the combined membership of all these organizations. We built this organization because we began to recognize that we needed a lot of power here. And by power, I mean very specifically organized people and organized money, the two forms of power in our society. We recognized, I think, we began to recognize that here in Wake County, we needed power because we're out here in a fairly competitive political arena, filled with a lot of different interests, and more, interests that are being shaped by the major corporations, the developers and companies that are relocating to our area, city councils and local governments that are all of a sudden representing, municipalities that are twice, 3 times as large as they were just 10 years ago. We recognize that in Wake County, we exist in a political arena where very often corporate leaders or political leaders don't embrace change unless they're pressured by the people that they serve. And that if we want affordable housing, for example, to be recognized as a top issue in our community, we have to enter that arena and make sure that this issue out-organizes and gets in front of other issues. And so, for example, before we invest in another dog park, we need to make sure that that we've got enough homes for our families. We built One Wake so congregations like yours could combine with other churches in the area and start to begin to address the more systemic roots of this problem. And in Cary, for example, we're starting to look into how Cary can begin to direct public investment in the forms of local dollars to invest in affordable housing for a dedicated housing fund, a more systemic approach to complement the existing services that congregations like yours are providing. Tell you what, let me just pause here. Let me check in and see if this is making sense or what your thoughts are. I told you a little bit about myself, and I've made a basic argument here. How's that landing with you? Questions, reactions, and be glad to hear a little bit from you, and then figure out where to go next.
It looks like Justin had just a couple of questions. Did you want to address those out loud, or do you want me to read them, Justin?
I can ask. So again, one of the things that I think is kind of current in everybody's mind is labor, and usually labor some at the higher rungs of the market, but a lot in the entry level jobs, service economy, are saying, you know what, minimum wage not cutting it for us. My time is too valuable, which only a couple of years ago people just kind of took it for granted. And I just wondered, do you see McDonald's going to $15 or $20 an hour, being able to create incomes that enable people to stay in communities, or is just inflationary costs? And again, I think I just saw an article that housing prices were up another 15% in September. Is essentially any of those wins for income just getting eaten up by inflationary costs?
Yeah, well, I think I'm punching a little bit above my weight here, but here's, thinking about this from more of an institutional or systemic perspective. I mean, it's common sense, right, that the cost of housing in our area is skyrocketing. I don't think anybody would argue that home values, rent is going beyond what anybody, ever imagined. I mean, I'm calling in here from Durham. 15 years ago, when they built the first lofts in a tobacco warehouse, people thought the developers had lost their minds. Nobody could ever have imagined, that, today the current owners of that property would be sitting on a gold mine. And I mean, you could say the same for downtown Raleigh, or out in Wendell. Nobody saw that 3,000 luxury homes would be dropped in the middle of a tobacco field. I mean, and especially over the last few years, it seems like things have only accelerated. I mean, it's not only are we competing now with people moving here, but with much higher incomes. And I believe your church is actually the closest institution I've been in to where Apple is going to land, and is already beginning to move in. I mean, we're going to have 3,000 jobs potentially, with people making $130,000 on average. I mean, imagine how much over asking price an Apple employee can go for the average home sale in Cary. I saw a 790 square foot home in downtown Cary on Zillow the other day for $800,000. Can you imagine that? And who would have thought that just 5 years ago or 3 years? I mean, so we're the housing supply is scarce. People are moving here. There's a lot of very high income jobs coming here that are bringing employees who can easily outcompete somebody working at McDonald's 5 times over. And we're also seeing institutional investors moving into our housing market from as far away as Silicon Valley. I mean, Zillow itself and other companies are buying and flipping homes. In Raleigh, Open Door bought a shockingly high percentage of all the homes sold just a couple of years ago. And I think they flipped them, and each flip, the house price went up 10 grand. And big institutional investors like BlackRock, hedge funds, even sovereign wealth are moving into our housing market for stable rates of return. They're buying up mobile home parks and apartment complexes like you wouldn't believe. And the few places that are left and that are affordable are, often in terrible substandard condition. So my very long way of answering you, I think, is that it's true that we're in a moment where it seems like, companies who haven't been paying anything close to a living wage are having to pay a little bit more to attract or retain employees. But I think that, I think that the average homeowner or the average renter who's earning in Cary, anything under $70,000 a year for the household is just outgunned. And part of the reason is because they're not up against just, individual tenants or home buyers as competition, but they're up against massive institutions that are investing in our housing market and driving the cost up considerably. So if we're going to look at this through a power lens, or, we need to make sure that our people, everyday residents of Cary, aren't just out there alone. And the power we can leverage, as citizens in the town of Cary or whatever town we happen to be in is, first, the substantial public dollars that are controlled by our local elected officials. In Cary, I came here from Orange County, which is best known for Chapel Hill. As snooty as that town can be, man, they are broke. They'll never admit it. But in Cary, you've got what is it? A $30 billion tax base. You've got at least $40 million over what's required in your fund balance today. That's just sitting there. If you're going to look at this from a power and institutional standpoint, if we want to take on housing inequality, we've got tools at our disposal. It's just a matter of prioritizing housing over other interests. Or, in the case of Cary, there's so much of a surplus, you could imagine it doesn't have to be zero sum here. You could just add, parks and recs, programs, facilities, and related debt get 7 cents out of the 35 cents that's charged for every $100 on the tax rate. Even just adding 1 penny for affordable housing would give us $3.2 million a year to play with. So that's a very long-winded answer, but does that make sense, Justin?
Yeah, again, it's one of these things of there's a level of fixed supply. Although my next kind of question is on the diversity of product. So I guess Raleigh just started finishing up the zoning authorization for tiny homes. And again, they sound neat. Again, you can fit a lot more on a small piece of land, although you might say, hey, should you do an apartment building?
Right.
But giving people a little bit of autonomy, giving them their walls, I think from a mental perspective also brings a whole lot of value. And didn't know if it's what's going to work. We can all see the problem, but Apple's not going away. The technology stuff is not going away. People moving in, selling their home in the Valley or in Austin or in Seattle for $1.5 million or $2 million, and then coming into our marketplace, not going to go away. So just trying to figure out what things can work. How can we be more positive, both on incomes rising to, again, better meet the ask from a cost of living, but also the types of products that are out there that can also be healthy in the marketplace, because we can't keep dropping high density and not have the elementary schools and the middle schools or the general services around them to meet the needs of that high density community.
Yeah,
Devin,
oh yes, go ahead.
Yeah, before we go solution, I just want to make sure Mama Kai has a hand raised, and that came during your last speech. Let me check with her. Do you want to come and ask your question? I don't know if that's a hand raise or like kind of a high five. I just want to double check.
Thank you so much for acknowledging that. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I am a guest here. I am not a member of this congregation. I am friends with the Riggs, and I've also had the opportunity and pleasure of working with Tirza, excuse me. And so it's a pleasure to be in this conversation. I actually feel like I was led here. I'm just going to say that because I was listening to Pastor Chris's message on Sunday, where Devin presented a message for Covenant Christian Church in Cary as well. And so when Miss Marie sent me this information, I felt very strongly that I needed to be here. My comment was that while we want to look at the large corporations and the investments that are now being made to buy property and to flip it and stuff like that. This issue started long before the last few years, when smaller real estate agencies like, I can't think of the name of it, I could look it up, but they were buying homes in predominantly Black communities, and homes that were deteriorated, they were buying them for less than $100,000 and turning them around and selling them for 200 and 250,000 and more. And so it started with smaller organizations, real estate agents and stuff like that, that began to gentrify predominantly Black areas. And that just opened a can of worms for anybody else to come in and do the same and do it to a greater degree, so that it's even more, it's created a larger gap for people to come above water. And this is something that was addressed in Durham and as well as Raleigh. At one of those city council meetings that I had attended for the city of Raleigh, the mayor of Durham had actually come to speak on how they were addressing that. And I don't know what it's like any longer there as far as gentrification and creating these opportunities for families to be able to survive, but it started long before what was the explosion that we've seen recently. And that was one of the things that I wanted to point out. The other thing is, as far as affordable homes are concerned, there is a gentleman out of Illinois who has had this plan to build affordable homes with recycled steel, and they cost far less than the way they're using the resources, and especially with the way that the price of resources, especially wood, is exploding, making renovations so much more expensive than they have been. That is a viable option. They have taken in the past from natural disasters. They have taken the mangled steel and different things of that nature, and they've been able to create the frames of homes out of that. And so if that's something that it can become an option, that is a resource that is available to be looked into. And I'm just going to stop right there because I will take up your whole conversation and in a heartbeat, but I'm just going to say I probably am not done.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening.
Yeah, don't leave me alone up here. It's great to and just I'd be glad to riff there for a second, and just in a cautious way, because again, I'm the new kid on the block, and these aren't my stories, but I was very moved or struck by so One Wake member institutions in Cary. We've got about 13 of them. We've been doing a lot of canvassing in town this year to talk about affordable housing. We've met a lot of the residents in the Kingswood neighborhood, just north of downtown, historically segregated African-American community. Some of them are members of Cary First Christian, which is a member institution of One Wake. I had the honor of meeting Sally Jones, who's in her 90s. She's the granddaughter of Arch Arrington. Many people may recognize that name as a key Black leader in Cary. She told a story of the old segregated school for African American kids in Cary that was just behind the high school, burning down in the I believe it was the 20s. The cause of the fire was never proven, but most people understood it to be white arsonists who were alarmed by the proximity of the school to the white high school. Perhaps they were afraid of integration, but when the school got burned down, the kids had nowhere to go, and the Cary town leaders at the time said, "Well, there's no room here. We don't have room to build a new school in town. You got to send your kids out to Method, out in Raleigh." There's a story that was recounted in the book both sides of the tracks, which is available at the Page Walker Hotel for free. I got a copy there, and Art Arrington in this meeting, he stands up and he says, "You can send your kids to Method. Our kids are going to stay right here." And residents of that neighborhood contributed the land and the resources necessary to build a new school for African American kids. That school turned into Kingswood Elementary School, which of course is still there. But I shared that story, and I think Miss Sally Jones shared that story with us, because Carrie, in many ways, for a very long time, has been telling people there's no room for them. In overt ways, through the burning of a school, refusing to let African American children get an education in town, and through much less overt and more systemic ways. Like, for example, the town, despite that really nice budget surplus, is in last place when it comes to public investment in affordable housing. Falling behind even Apex, which is far smaller but contributing far more to build and preserve affordable housing in town. So it's what we're seeing today is unique, to our context and time, but it's built on a deep history that I'm so glad that is it Mama Kai mentioned, and that we can't that's inextricably connected to where we are today. That the people who invested their own resources to help build this town because they had no other choice can no longer afford to stay in their historic neighborhoods. And the people who have moved here more recently, who work the low wage jobs that keep this town running, and the town's at 20,000 jobs that pay, I believe, less than $50,000 a year over the last 10 years. Those families can't afford to stay here either. So it's, when we talk about affordable housing in Cary, we're talking about recognizing the historic investment of for example, the Kingswood neighbors and the more recent ongoing investment of all the people working to keep our grocery stores and hospitals and schools open and running. And it could be said that one reason why the town of Cary is able to run such a lean operation and generate such a budget surplus and to keep taxes in Cary are the lowest in Wake County. The argument could be made that the only reason why that's possible is because the town has, whether consciously or not, chosen to externalize the cost of running the town on the people who are least able to afford it, in the form of longer and longer commutes that people who are making very little money have to pay with out of pocket, or all the other ways that working class people subsidize the town every day. I think I got a little long-winded there again, but let's pause there. Other reactions, other questions?
Just wondering, how can we help? What can we do?
Yeah. So here's the silver lining in all that. And there's a lot of silver here, right? But I think one of the upshots of Cary being in last place in terms of local investment, financial investment in affordable housing. Cary has a great staff. The affordable housing plan the town just passed is a good start. I don't want to dog the town too much, but I think one of the benefits of being in last place is that that there's some low-hanging fruit here. There are some things that can be done and should be done as kind of like the foundational or the basic package, right? we don't know all the steps. We don't necessarily know the full solution to making sure everybody has a safe, decent home, but we know the kind of things that you usually want to see as kind of the basic checklist, right? So that's one thing that we've decided to focus on as One Wake, that the leaders of our member institutions in Cary have decided to focus on is introducing a dedicated annual housing fund to subsidize the creation and preservation of more affordable homes. This has been done in the Triangle. It's been done in Chapel Hill, Durham, Raleigh, Apex, and Wake County, typically through the prioritization of 1 penny or more off of the property tax rate that generates an annual revolving fund that can then leverage additional investment for affordable housing development, and is often required as a prerequisite for funding from other sources of investors that put money into affordable housing projects. So in Chapel Hill, for example, the affordable housing developer DHIC was able to build a 69-unit senior living center through the investment of $1.1 million from this local affordable housing fund in Chapel Hill. They then leveraged that money 10 times over through other investment. At the end of the day, the town of Chapel Hill was able to, help build a development at the cost of only about $17,000 per unit for again about 70 senior citizens. I mean, that's a great deal. Creating a local fund could open up a lot of opportunities like that in Cary, and could signal to affordable housing developers that the town's really getting serious about building more affordable homes here. Often developers will, not even bother to seriously consider a development project in a town or a city that doesn't have a fund like this, because other towns do, and it's just easier to do it when you know that a community is willing to put its money where its mouth is. So the silver lining here is we've got some low-hanging fruit, and we've decided to start there. Just a few weeks ago, we hosted the largest. Well, it's all virtual now, so I'll claim it. Why not? Let's claim it. So just a few weeks ago, One Wake hosted the largest candidate event in recent history in Cary. We had a very early candidate session with 5 of the 7 known candidates for town council. The election was delayed till next March, as many of you might be aware, to lay out the argument for the creation of a dedicated housing fund, to give candidates time to respond about their position on the issue, and to set the stage for making affordable housing not only a top election issue next spring, but also a top issue and top priority for the next fiscal year budget, which will be passed in late June, July. And we're anticipating the need to organize very energetically, to turn people out very consistently and persistently. 3 weeks ago, we had 350 households logged into this candidate event. And we're going to continue to take action to deliver our people all across town for the entire spring, to make sure that this priority stays at the very forefront of candidates' minds, and later, our elected officials' minds as they put together next year's budget. So, and we do this again because we're not operating in a vacuum. There's a lot of interest here in town. We're not necessarily talking about a property tax increase, but we could be. That might be against the interests of some of the players in the private sector. That might be against the interests of people who don't really want to see affordable housing in Cary. Our goal, one thing that we can do is we can deliver more people more consistently than the opposition, and signal to our elected leaders that this issue is something that they should prioritize with their decisions. We can talk more about what that looks like, but that's one concrete thing that One Wake member institutions are planning to do next spring.
Devin, could you define affordable housing, what that looks like in Cary for us?
Yeah, well, it's a real squishy term, because any house is affordable to the person who can afford it, right? So a $5 million mansion is affordable to a billionaire, but generally, when you talk about affordable housing, you slip into a bit of jargon. You talk a lot about the area median income. This is, oh gosh, I should know this off the top of my head. In Cary, there's a median income of a household. If anybody here knows it, please shout it out. But typically, affordable housing developments are for the benefit of people who earn 80% or less of the area median income. So at 80%, you're looking at typically like white collar professionals, maybe some of the more highly paid teachers, perhaps hospital technicians. If you go down to 60% or 50% of the area median income, you're getting to the bulk of your teachers, your firefighters, your public safety workers. There's more recently been a big push to prioritize resources for people earning even less than that, 30% of the area median income or below. And when I say a bigger push, I mean just in the affordable housing, universe. These are people at 30% or below are often working in retail, fast food, groceries, providing essential services that keep a town running, that are often keeping the restaurants running that are on the front page of the Visitor Bureau documents, without whom you wouldn't really have a town or a culture. But they're making what do you make, 30 grand or less doing that kind of work, and good luck in Cary or really anywhere in Wake County trying to compete for an apartment at that. And at the very low end of the spectrum, you've got people who are, obviously you have people who are unemployed, people on fixed incomes like senior citizens, and others. So so when I say affordable housing, I mean housing that's targeted to that huge range of people, none of whom can really afford to live in town. And by afford, I should say the definition of affordable is you're spending more than 30% of your household income on housing and utilities, then that's considered unaffordable. And and I gotta say that even if you're paying, let's say, 29% of your household income on housing, that's still pretty bad, right?
Big stretch.
Yeah, that's not great. That's so when I say affordable housing, that's what I'm referring to.
So in this area, that largely would be things like apartments, mobile homes. In the care, it's different in Mississippi, but in this area, we're talking apartments, duplexes, multiple use buildings. Is that kind of what affordable housing would look like in our context?
That's right. Yeah. So if you go to the mobile estates right off of Maynard, which is called Las Americas by the residents who live there, your lot rent at mobile estates is $400 a month.
Gotcha.
And you got to own your own home or pay rent on your mobile home on top of that. But yeah, that looks like a $400 lot rent at Las Americas. You go down to the Arbors or Ashton Place off of Wren Drive. You might find some apartments under $1,000 there, which is the lower end of what you're going to find around town for housing that's just market rate. But you might not even have heat or air conditioning out there. but that's typically what we mean. And then of course you've got single family homes that often elderly people live in. They own the home outright, but they're on fixed incomes and their property taxes are going up, and they can't keep up with it. So that's another form of affordable housing is low income homeowners. But as property taxes rise, people have to sell. They move very far away, and those houses get flipped until they're selling for $800,000. Even if they're very small.
Kai, you have your hand up. Go ahead and take it again, please.
Okay, so you'll have to forgive me because my mind is racing and there's a lot of, thoughts in my head. The first of which is that it seems that those who are looking to address the quote unquote affordable housing issue are missing one big point. And that is that everybody is housed. And so when you go out and you spend the night in an emergency shelter and you have to be in by a certain time and be out by a certain time, then you begin to understand the path that somebody else is under. I looked up the numbers for management and staff of two pretty prominent nonprofit agencies that are supposed to quote unquote help people who are experiencing homelessness, and $2.7 million is going towards salaries and related expenses on their financial reports that they turned in 2020. It's probably less than that. So I went and I looked at 1-bedroom apartments in Raleigh and Cary. Most of them have a median about $1,500 a month, which translate to about $40,000 a year. With $2.7 million, you can put over 100 people in homes. Now, my challenge is that we're always looking at affordable housing. And when you do that, therein is automatically a judgment of somebody's worth based on how much they earn. And when you're talking about people, we are of infinite worth. People get put in places that they're not comfortable, that they're not going to get the community support that they need for their children. They're not going to be safe, possibly. And I think we need to begin to look at things from a different perspective. My mind says that with money coming in, that all money should be put towards simply putting people in homes. That's the way to end homelessness. And the model that runs through my mind is like the place at the table in Raleigh, where it's a pay what you can cafe. And so when you have these different demographics coming into this restaurant, everybody is able to enjoy a meal together. People who are driving Teslas are there along with the people who are living on the street. Everybody's eating good, healthy food. And I am just, I'm struggling with this idea that those who, the industry of helping quote unquote people who are poverty stricken or homeless is a $1 billion industry. And yet very few of that money actually goes towards putting people in homes. So how do we change that? Because when I think about creating change, it has nothing to do with politics, because Jesus knew that the government hated him. So he created his own group and he went forth, and with his disciples, he began to teach regardless of how the people felt at that time. Then I think about the civil rights movement, and they knew the Black people in that time, they knew the government hated them, from Governor Boggs, even to people in the presidency. And what they do is they gathered together, they created the change they wanted, and then the government was then forced to follow. And so I'm really, I struggle with this conversation simply because I'm around a lot of people who are prosperous, and I'm around a lot of people who are in poverty. And unfortunately, poverty isn't just something that's financial. It starts internally. And when so many people are struggling with their internal battles, then to be able to produce externally becomes that much harder. And when those things aren't addressed on a level that will help people to heal and be able to create and live in a manner that is prosperous, then the things are going to continue to get worse instead of better. And I feel like we're addressing things in a way that really only, once it kind of beats around a bush of the actual problem, is not solving anything at this moment. But there are people that are out there that when the emergency shelters aren't open because the weather is above 35 degrees, they're sleeping outside, either on the benches or attempting to sleep outside because it's illegal to sleep in the parks in Raleigh. And so they're sitting out on benches. Mama Maria, she's in her 60s. She's got a hurt ankle. She's out there dragging her bags. So many people are dragging their bags on and off buses, sitting in the park all day, freezing. All these high-rise buildings that are going up are blocking the sunlight from people who are sitting in the park just trying to get warm. And everyday people who have a place to go home to, they don't touch these things. And they just don't touch them. Then we're not even talking about the community of people that are living in hotels. We're not talking about the community of people that are living in storage units, in the woods, or any other places. And so I struggle with what I hear as solutions, because the most immediate solution is to put people in homes and then put a community of people around them to help them. And that isn't anything that I'm genius about. It comes from the scriptures, because that's what I believe happened in the parable of the exceptional Samaritan. There's also a book that was written a long time ago. I don't even remember the year, but there was a gentleman, and I believe he was a pastor. I could be wrong, but his name was Harv Oostdyk. It's Oostdyk, and he wrote a book that was called The Gospel, Step 1, The Gospel in the Ghetto. And he talked about a comprehensive solution to addressing poverty. And it was to go through the churches. And just like every time that as I go through this journey that my son and I have been on with God, and he reveals things to me, just the other day, he was saying, poverty should not exist with 75% of America being Christian. And the words that are in the Bible that suggest that whatever you would do unto others as would have done unto you. So if you're living in a home, the first thing would be to put a person in the home and worry about how they're going to pay for it later. Pay for that home. And so I think, like, how many people are in this area? Can we get a million people to donate $1, to donate 2 pennies? That's 100 pennies. We're looking for the government to give us penny taxes. Is there a way to get Wake County to say, if we had everybody to give us a penny, what can we do? What can we do as a group right now to say, we want this money? And even though if we can only house a few people, let's do that. Let's get our elderly off the street. Let's get our veterans off the street. Let's put them in homes so that they then can become contributing members of society. And we put people around them that can support them in that journey so that they can become stable. Because a lot of times it just takes a little bit of love, but a whole lot of community. And so that's all I'm going to say right now. Excuse me.
Thank you so much, Kai. I think that's one of the things that excites me about One Wake, is that it is a community of people working together, that it's multiple organizations, and realizing Crosspoint isn't able to do things on our own. We may be able to, put a few people in homes, but we may not be able, we have to be able to come together as a group in order to say, Cary and Wake County, we need the property in order to build houses to put people in. We need, not only that, we need churches that can rally around people to be a support system around people. And it's more than one organization can do. It's going to take all of us as a community helping to get people into homes and helping to get people supported. Thank you for that, Kai.
Devin, you have Crosspoint members here hungry to help.
Yeah.
What in a dream world, what can one congregation do to help? Right? What can we, the 23 of us that represent 1,000, what's the dream? What can we do to kind of help you and this organization?
Yeah. Well, I could think of a few things, and the first thing starts with building a team. And Mama Kai's right. I mean, this goes back to Jesus, right? He built a team, and 11 of them were pretty good. So the first thing we do with congregations is we help you build a team of leaders, and maybe that's the group of people here on this call who have the appetite to help reorganize your congregation. That's already doing good work around service and outreach. To help reorganize your congregation towards this particular kind of power organizing as well. So it's think of it this way. So if we want to get that dollar or that penny from every Terry household, if we want to create a new pool of funds, we want to hold our local government accountable and support low-income residents who are demanding the same kind of treatment that the owners of the Fenton development get, for example. We're going to need some numbers. What we help congregations like yours do is to begin to build on your existing relational culture, help your leaders, help this team develop your following, or draw on your following, your existing relationships within your congregation, to make people aware of this issue, to help them get involved in nonpartisan, external campaigns to prioritize investing in families and people and affordable homes, and then at key moments to deliver significant numbers to help pressure, in strategic ways, key decision makers to respond to our agenda and our proposals. So, for example, and the numbers aren't too bad here, right? So, for example, I think about when you talk about local politics, I think about in Terry. Could be wrong on this, but I think only about 7 or 8% of the voting population here participated in the 2017 municipal election. Races are won or lost. District C got won back in 2017 by 290 votes, and I'm not picking on Jack Smith right now, but I'm just pointing out how low those numbers are. With 1,000, 1,500 people working together consistently and persistently, you can change the political trajectory of a community, to invest not only in high-end luxury stuff, but also in healthy families and safe and decent homes. And so in a perfect world, it doesn't even have to be that perfect. In the world as it is today, what we could do is we could help you build a team like that here at Crosspoint. We could help you get into relationship with all the other institutions that are participating in this effort in Terry, to help you build relationships with other congregations, with some of the neighborhood leaders who are involved in this work, to get into relationship with the families at Las Americas or at the Arbors or in Kingswood, and then to push really consistently on this very specific issue we've developed. I mean, not just overnight, but through years of talking and listening and understanding the pressures that are facing families across Terry. So, I think give me a day or two to imagine the perfect world, but I think in today's world, that's what we could do together in the next 6 months.
Devin, I do want to say, I just put a link in the chat for anybody that is interested in being a part of a team like that. And it's not committing you to that, but it's just kind of, if you're at Crosspoint and you want to be a part of something like that, that gives us an idea of who would want to talk more about it too. So that's what that is.
Yeah. Let's see, other questions or reactions, or Brandon, do you want me to elaborate there? Did I get your question answered?
That sounded really good. Any other questions or comments? I just got a question in. Do you feel like other cities in the US have a good, successful model that we can learn from? Is there a city that's doing something well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of examples. When we look to solutions, I'd recommend looking to what works in North Carolina in particular, because different states have different rules, right? I think what's most important is what's been made to work in comparable communities across the state. In a state where local municipalities have relatively limited power or discretion in their decision making, and where the state legislature has the ultimate authority in what can happen in any town or city. Go even closer. I mean, you could look to the triangle. I mean, there's no shortage of solutions or good ideas. And we've heard about a lot of them. We've heard at least about some of them. There's providing local subsidy. That's kind of a catch-all for anything. To do anything, you need to invest in it, and you need money. That's fine. Tiny homes is one solution. Changing regulatory or zoning structures to allow the creation of more multifamily to meet housing demand and potentially drive down prices on the market side. There's land banking. There's cooperative housing. There's a lot of things that have been tried here in the triangle. I think that the question is, what's going to work best in right here in Cary for your own particular mix of your political reality here, and the economic reality, and the limitations and/or opportunities presented by your current town council. I think most importantly is what do the people who who are most directly impacted by this issue, what makes the most sense there. I know we've identified apartment renters want safe, decent homes and want to be able to hold their landlords accountable to provide air conditioning and heating, longtime homeowners need help with property taxes. We've got a number of families still in the mobile estates development who have completed rent-to-own payments on their mobile homes and still haven't received titles, which puts them in an extremely precarious position. And there's a ton of families who are just getting pushed out because of rising rents. I mean, this is just scratching the surface. Again, we're the new kids on the block here. I don't want to sound like I understand this town completely, but I think looking to that and having more conversations with people who are struggling to live here is a good place to start when you're thinking about solutions.
Yeah, thank you.
A couple people are thanking you, Devin, for what you're doing.
Oh yeah. Oh, I probably should have led with this, but just to be clear, so I do work quite hard. A lot of people do, but just to make it clear, this isn't my organization, right? I am staff to One Wake, but it's myself. There's 2 other full-time staff members that work for this organization. That's it. So One Wake draws its power almost entirely from clergy, from ministry leaders, from neighborhood, from block captains. That's where our juice is. And So I'm always happy to be thanked, but just to make it clear, I work for an organization that is controlled and mostly funded by the institutions like Crosspoint. So I'll take some of the credit, but a lot of it goes to volunteer leaders who are putting in a lot of overtime here to push this issue in Cary right now. A lot of people lost a lot of sleep leading up to that candidate assembly, for example, coming home from their day jobs and squeezing in, their writing their scripts for the event, just after putting their kids to bed. So, yeah, just to make it clear, I'm staffed to something that's owned and led by institutions just like yours.
Kai, I think got your hands up again.
Yeah, I've calmed down.
No worries, go ahead.
My question, I have one question and one comment. First of all, as far as I personally am concerned, I serve a mighty God and I serve a God of miracles, and we are in a season of miracles. And I think there is, I think we can't put a time frame on things because we minimize the power of what God can do when people who are in agreement with one another come together and work to make changes for the benefit of everyone. So that's my only thing, that we should never minimize the capacity of what we can do and the time frame that we can do it in, because if we put in our efforts and God puts in his, then miracles always occur. The question that I had is, how many in Wake County, with the need for families who are unhoused in particularly, what is the real problem? Is it that there are not enough homes to house everybody? Or is it simply that people can't afford those homes that are available?
I mean, my answer comes from our particular tradition of organizing, but our position is that the primary power is that ordinary people in Wake County, as individuals, don't have the power they need to get, in this case, to get affordable homes or to get the kind of education their kids deserve, to get living wage jobs. So I think the problem is fundamentally about power, and that larger interests, big corporate interests, even local government often overlook the needs of ordinary residents unless they organize themselves and hold people responsible for the pressures facing them accountable. So I think if we get power, if we get enough of it, I mean, we can take on affordable housing in Cary. If we get a lot of juice, we can have. We can get Tim Cook out to a meeting and ask him how Apple's going to invest here in North Carolina like they've invested in California for housing for working families.
Let's do it.
Yeah, that's right. So I'd say that's the problem, that people with power get everything they want and more, and that people without it are ignored and made to feel invisible, not worthy, or not recognized for what they contribute. And then unless we all get more power together, that's just going to keep happening.
Devin, is there a book or a website or a journal that would be good? A question in the chat about what are some resources for people who want to learn more about the complexity of this issue? Is there something that is kind of your go-to recommendation, or is it a combination of things? Yeah,
I could put together a list and send it to you for a follow-up. I mean, when it comes to housing's pretty well trod soil. So there's a lot there, and I can find some things that kind of answer that question from our particular discipline. Now, I'll get you
that'd be great. Yeah,
an article, a book, and a podcast. That's my commitment.
Cool. We'll take it.
Great.
Gang, any other questions? Maybe for someone who hasn't been able to share yet, or type of question, just make sure that we get everyone covered.
Do you think we're in a crisis type mode yet? And I say that because I work in the school system. I'm also a nurse, and I am seeing shortages on both ends. Like right now, Wake County needs about 800 teachers. We need about 35 school nurses. And that's not even counting your ancillary services, your bus drivers. And I will say, at the beginning of school, I had one principal. We had 13 open positions and for teachers. And he said, it's not affordable. I can't hire anyone because the teachers cannot afford. Now this is Millbrook High School, so we're in the middle of Raleigh. He said, but they're turning positions down because it's not affordable. Are we close to where we're in a crisis situation?
Oh, well, I think it's been a crisis for a long time. I think the question is it being recognized and addressed or not? And I think in Cary, I mean, again, I don't want to diminish Cary's housing plan. They're extremely high caliber housing staff, you know, and some promising steps forward. But I think in Cary, the issue is that the crisis has been slow to be recognized and addressed, and the town, you know, Cary's probably about 6 or 7 years behind where other major triangle cities have already are. So we've got some catch up work to do in Cary, but yes, crisis has been here, but you know, it's kind of like the pandemic, right? By the time you read about it in the newspaper, it's already spread everywhere.
Yeah.
Now the question is, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Question, couple. I just scroll back up. A lot of the solutions feel to this person kind of long range. What can we do in the interim with those that have no stable housing? And I would say that that might be a question both for Devin and then also for Crosspoint, right? So what can
That's
Crosspoint
right.
do to help? And then what can an organization like One Wake do to help?
Yeah, I'd say, that's right. So what we are talking about are longer term solutions and are not. One Wake is the tool for policy change, you know, whether that's public policy or corporate policy. It's a tool that that generally leads to solutions that take, you know, I mean, 6 months would be a quick campaign, for example. You know, we're talking probably most of the work we do it's 1 to 3 years of organizing work to get what we would consider a victory. You know, so One Wake is a good tool for addressing longer term systemic issues, but we're not the appropriate tool when it comes to emergency assistance. And on that, I think you know, expanding and not neglecting your existing ministries with emergency assistance and care is very important. You know, you're already doing that work. There's probably even more that could be done there, and you know, and we intend for this organizing to be complementary to that, but to not replace it and to not diminish the importance of that kind of assistance either.
Tirza, could you talk? I think Pam dropped off. Could you talk a little bit about what Crosspoint is doing right now for those who have emergency issues, just for people who might not be aware of kind of what Crosspoint is already doing, and then maybe ways people can get involved with that?
Sure. So you know that we pay emergency bills, and that changed quite a little bit during COVID because people had different emergency housing needs during COVID that were COVID related. But we continue to pay rents and bills and things like that, or send people to through organizations that also pay immediate housing, really to avoid eviction is the goal. And then we work through with Operation Nael as far as working with they're housed individuals because they're living in hotels in Apex. We also work with Habitat for Humanity to to find affordable home ownership. That's on a smaller scale, but incredibly important. And then also through organizations like White Oak Foundation that are also doing things within our county and also within Durham and Chatham counties. So our goal really is to partner with other organizations that are doing a lot of work already, and then kind of networking with churches in order to kind of pool resources together to work. Again, like we also do work with Family Promise, which is emergency shelters for families experiencing homelessness. But our goal really is to move beyond that and do exactly kind of what Devin's been talking about tonight, because that's not solving the problem. That's just helping really in emergency situations when people come to us in an emergency, because it's more about being able to get long-term sustainable housing for people, and to really push Cary and Wake County to make more locations available so that people can do that. Because what we see is people coming and maybe they've got they've got a organization or a company that they're renting from that doesn't care if they can pay their bill or not, because they've got somebody else waiting in the wings to be able to pay their bill. So it's multifaceted, and that kind of what Justin was talking about earlier, they aren't making enough in wages to be able to pay for a home, and there's not enough affordable housing within their financial bracket that they can afford to live in. And so 1 week out of work means they can't pay their rent. 1 sick kid means that they can't go to work and they can't pay their rent. And so their landlord would much readily evict them because there's somebody waiting to have that house, because there's simply not enough housing. Now there's some private rental individuals that we work with that often are sometimes a little bit more lenient as far as, letting rent come in late and things like that. But so many times it's, I have to choose between paying my rent this month or paying my water bill, or I'm paying rent this month, but now I can't afford the internet and my kid needs it for school. Or I'm going to Wake Tech and I can't do my homework because I can't pay, my bill. So those are the types of things that are happening in Cary. This is not deep, Durham. This is these are our neighbors. These are people, working with White Oak Gifts that are saying, I'm a bus driver and I've been doing this for 17 years and I cannot afford to give my kids Christmas, or, I can't afford to do these things. And so it's a multifaceted thing that requires more than it requires us getting on board with other organizations and being vocal being in those meetings that are happening when people are making policy changes, when people are doing city development, like a lot of the things that Devin was talking about on the 11th, talking to candidates and saying what's important to you, being there when Fuquay and Apex and Cary are talking about where they're putting their funding. And then also saying things that we mentioned before. Well, you've got that affordable, but we also need a school there. Wake County Public Schools has the funding, and North Carolina has the funding to be able to build some of those schools, and to say, let's do that. And then some of the things, even the YMCA being very creative in the most recent YMCA that they built that is connected. They built a school at the same time over by Rock Quarry. And so that is in conjunction with building affordable housing, building a school, having a YMCA that provides aftercare, and now actually, hopefully, COVID's kind of put a stop to it, but building things like community grocery stores and things. So it's not just about building a home, but it's kind of what Kai was saying too. It's an entire support system. So all of these things are kind of thinking outside of the box. And that's really why we would love we've talked about this a lot. We've talked to you individually a lot about it, but we really would love a team of people to come and just who have been passionate about it, to come together and not only make us aware and to continue to keep this in the forefront of what Crosspoint talks about and what is important to Crosspoint, but to help us to partner and you know, link arms with other people in our community that are doing the same thing. Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to stop our recording just for now, and then we can still chat if we want. And I want to say thank you. I think we could talk about this for many, many more hours. But I want to say thank you to Devin and to everybody that shared tonight. And then Devin, do you have anything else that you want to add before we, you know, end officially? And then we can stay in chat for anybody that wants to talk some more.
Yeah, just to say that you know, of course, you know, Advent has begun. You know, our year is drawing to a close, but the last thing we're going to do is, as One Wake, is we're going to have an internal meeting this Thursday, 7:30 p.m. And if that's a virtual meeting, I can share that link. If you feel like doing double duty with One Wake this week, you can come check us out. We'll be laying out some vision for next year, and then if you want to get involved in this work, I'm happy to meet with a team here to talk a little bit more practically about what that looks like inside a congregation and how you can get into action with us in the first quarter of the year in 2022. But for now, it's been great to be with you. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm happy to continue with it with you. So thanks for your time.
Perfect. And I do want to say all the things that I mentioned, we're not going to stop doing. Crosspoint isn't going to stop any of those partnerships or any of those initiatives that we're doing. We're just kind of adding to it and deepening the level of things that we're doing, if that helps clarify a little bit. So